Marisol Escalante opened her eyes 15 minutes before the alarm clock rang. The habit of waking up early had developed over the years of working for the company. She stretched and looked at her husband sleeping next to her. Raoul always slept in until the last minute, managing to get ready in a record 20 minutes. His morning ritual was perfected: contrasting shower, light makeup, white silk blouse, navy blue suit, and low-heeled shoes. Marisol never allowed herself to appear in the office sloppily dressed. Her status as co-owner of the company obliged her to maintain a certain image. Descending to the underground parking lot of her house in an upscale neighborhood of Mexico City, she got behind the wheel of a silver Mercedes. Morning traffic had long been a part of her life, as had the cup of Americano she always bought at the small coffee shop across the street from her office. "Good morning, Senora Ordóñez," the security guard greeted her as he opened the door of the glass and metal high-rise building. "Good morning, Jorge." Marisol smiled slightly as she walked through the turnstile. Rosita's secretary met her in the reception area, holding out a folder of papers for her signature and a schedule of meetings for the day. Marisol was mechanically going through the papers when Carmen Uriarte, her best friend and the company's CFO, knocked on the office door. "Do you have a minute?" Carmen looked flustered. "Sure, come on in." Marisol set the papers aside. "Is something wrong?" "The suppliers have raised their prices again. We need to discuss new contract terms." They were immersed in their work, discussing figures and charts, when the shrill sound of a fire alarm made them flinch. At first, Marisol thought it was just another drill, but when alarmed voices and stomping feet were heard in the hallway, she knew something was wrong. "Everybody out of the building! This is not a drill," came the voice of the head of security over the loudspeakers. Marisol quickly grabbed her bag and phone. Together with Carmen, they joined the stream of employees rushing to the evacuation exits. The acrid smell of smoke was already in the air. "Where's Raoul?" Carmen looked around as they made their way down the stairs. "Should be in a meeting on the 4th floor." Marisol tried to speak calmly, but anxiety was building inside. As they stepped outside, they saw puffs of smoke billowing out of the 5th-floor windows. In the distance, they could already hear fire sirens wailing. Marisol frantically dialed her husband's number, but the phone answered with long beeps. "Senora Ordóñez!" A panting Rosita ran up to her. "Senor Raoul asked me to tell you that he's already outside, on the other side of the building." Marisol exhaled with relief. A few minutes later, the fire trucks arrived. Red cars with their blinkers on, firefighters in hazmat suits, hoses deployed. It all seemed unreal, like stills from a movie. "Marisol!" Raoul was making his way through the crowd toward her. His usually immaculate suit was wrinkled and a worried expression frozen on his face. "Thank God you're okay." He hugged her tightly, and for a moment Marisol felt as protected as she had in the early years of their marriage. The department heads were gathered around them, all tensely watching the firefighters at work. Paola Iturralde, the head of sales, stood a little apart, nervously rubbing the strap of her purse. Marisol noted that her flawless hair was disheveled and her cheeks were blotchy red, but it wasn't a matter of observing the appearance of the staff. The firefighters acted quickly and smoothly. An hour later, the head of the fire brigade reported that the fire was localized. The cause was a short circuit in the server room. Fortunately, the modern fire extinguishing system worked in time, and the fire did not have time to spread to other rooms. "We were lucky," Raoul put his hand on his wife's shoulder. "It could have been much worse. How about we celebrate tonight at La Casa del Mar? I've been promising to take you to that restaurant for a long time." Marisol agreed, though she would have preferred to spend the evening at home. The events of the day had left an unpleasant residue, and she felt a strange uneasiness she could not explain. That evening, sitting at a table in an expensive restaurant overlooking the city, she watched her husband. Raoul was animated, talking a lot about the company's development plans and new contracts. In the candlelight, his face seemed younger, reminiscent of the determined young man she had fallen in love with 10 years ago. "To our company," he raised his glass of red wine, "and to having such a great team." Marisol smiled and tasted the wine. She couldn't agree more. They had indeed assembled some excellent professionals over the years they'd worked together. Though some of her husband's personnel decisions lately had raised questions for her. They returned home late. Raoul went straight to the shower, and Marisol stopped at the panoramic window of the living room. It had been a busy day, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a series of events that would change her life. 2 weeks had passed since the office fire. Life was slowly returning to normal, but Marisol couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She noticed it in the smallest things. Raoul was staying late more often at work. His phone was now always face down, and on weekends he was leaving for important meetings more and more often. That morning, Marisol arrived at the office earlier than usual. The stack of papers on her desk demanded attention, but her thoughts kept returning to the strange conversation she'd overheard last night. Raoul had been on the phone in his office, thinking she'd already gone home. His voice sounded unaccustomedly soft. "Yes, of course. Tomorrow at 3. I'll set it up." She was absent-mindedly thumbing through papers when Carmen entered the office with a cup of freshly brewed coffee. "You look tired," her friend remarked, taking a seat in the chair opposite. "Didn't sleep well." Marisol rubbed her temples. "Carmen, have you noticed anything strange about Raoul's behavior lately?" Carmen set her cup on the table and looked at her friend carefully. "Is it about anything in particular?" "About his interactions with Paula Iturralde. Is it just me, or have they started spending too much time together?" "I thought you wouldn't notice." Carmen lowered her voice. "I saw them together last week at a cafe on Avenida Reforma. They were sitting in the far corner discussing something very animatedly. When I walked in, Raoul pretended not to notice me." Marisol felt herself grow cold inside. She remembered a week ago when Raoul had said he'd be late for a meeting with the suppliers. That night he'd smelled like an unfamiliar perfume. Could it just be work issues? Marisol tried to convince herself, but her voice treacherously shook. "Work issues are usually handled in the office, not in secluded corners of restaurants." Carmen shook her head. "And then, have you noticed how she's been dressing lately? That expensive jewelry, the new designer suits?" Marisol remembered noticing a bracelet from a famous jewelry house on Paula's wrist last week, the exact same one she herself had wanted to buy a month ago. Raoul had said then that it was too expensive. There was a knock at the door. It was Rosita with another stack of documents for her signature. "Señora Ordóñez, these are term contracts. Also, Señor Raoul asked me to tell you that he won't be able to have dinner with you tonight. He has an important meeting with investors." Marisol nodded, keeping a nonchalant expression on her face. Only when the door closed behind the receptionist did she allow herself to sigh heavily. "Fourth important meeting in a week," she looked at Carmen. "And always at the last minute." After lunch, Marisol went down to the sales department under the pretense of discussing quarterly figures. As she passed Paula's office, she heard a familiar laugh. The door was ajar and she saw Raoul leaning over Paula's desk, pointing at something in the paperwork. Their faces were unnecessarily close. That evening, sitting in her empty apartment, Marisol looked through her work mail. Among the emails, she found a strange one. Paula had sent Raoul documents at 10 o'clock last Friday evening when he was supposedly at a business dinner with his partners. The subject line was, "As agreed." Raoul's phone rang somewhere in the back of the apartment. Marisol followed her husband, who quickly stepped out onto the balcony, closing the door tightly behind him. His silhouette was clear against the evening sky, his gestures animated as if he were enjoying the conversation. The next morning, Marisol arrived at the office an hour later than usual. She noticed Raoul tense when she entered his office unannounced. He hurriedly closed some papers and pushed them aside. "Honey, you could have warned me you were coming." His voice sounded irritated. "Should I have? It's my company too, remember?" Marisol sat down in the chair across from him. "Of course. It's just that I have an important negotiation in 15 minutes." "With Paola Iturralde?" Marisol watched his reaction carefully. For a split second his face changed, but he quickly pulled himself together. "No, with representatives from the San Rafael Clinic. We're discussing the delivery of new equipment." "Maybe we should discuss the sales department's performance, Paola's latest figures." "Not now," he interrupted sharply. "And actually, I don't think you should interfere with that department. I'm in control of things myself." Marisol walked out of his office feeling her heart racing. She headed straight for Carmen. "You were right," she said, closing her friend's office door behind her. "Something is going on, and I don't like it at all." Saturday began for Marisol with her usual tennis practice at the Reform Athletic Club. It was the only outlet where she could distract herself from her obsessive thoughts about what was going on in the company. Raoul had never been interested in tennis, considering it too elitist a sport, and she was glad of that. Here she could be herself, without having to keep the mask of a successful businessman's prosperous wife. Carmen was already waiting for her on the court, warming up with her coach. The friends had met here every Saturday for the past 5 years. Marisol changed into a snow-white tennis uniform that perfectly emphasized her slender figure and stepped onto the court. "You're early today," Carmen remarked as she served the ball. "Raoul's away for a meeting again." Saturday morning, Marisol hit her serve with such force that the ball flew far out of the court. "Easy," Carmen smiled. "You're going to break your racket like that." They had been playing for about an hour when a tall man in a dark sports uniform appeared on a neighboring court. Marisol couldn't help but admire his game. Every movement was polished, professional. He was playing alone, practicing his serves with an automatic machine. "That's Esteban Cervantes," Carmen whispered, intercepting her friend's gaze. "They say he used to play professionally, now coaches kids from rich families." Marisol nodded, trying to focus on the game, but her attention kept returning to the neighboring court. At one point, she unsuccessfully kicked the ball and it flew straight toward Esteban. The man caught the ball easily and headed toward their court. "I believe this is yours." His voice came out pleasant with a slight huskiness. "Beautiful game, by the way. Your technique is excellent." "Thank you." Marisol felt the color flood her cheeks. "I'm nowhere near professional level, though." "Don't be modest. I've been watching you play. With such potential, you need a more experienced sparring partner," he smiled, and fine lines appeared in the corners of his eyes. "Hinting at you?" Carmen winked at Marisol. "Why not? I'm just looking for a partner to practice with on Saturdays." Esteban pulled a business card from his pocket. "Consider my offer." Marisol took the card, trying not to show how her fingers trembled. The white cardboard had her name and phone number engraved in gold letters. After practice, the friends sat in the club cafe, sipping freshly squeezed orange juice. "He's obviously interested in you." Carmen looked at her friend meaningfully. "Oh, come on. He's just being polite." "Polite people don't hand out business cards to strange married women." Carmen sipped her juice. "And they don't look the way he looked at you." Marisol twirled the business card in her hands. Esteban was indeed attractive, tall, trim, with a noble gray on his temples. But the thought of a possible flirtation made her feel guilty. "I'm married, Carmen. To a man who spends Saturday mornings not with you, but with his female co-worker." Her friend's voice grew harsher. "You don't know for sure." "No, I do. I saw them last night at the Casa Lucia restaurant. They were sitting in a separate office, and it was clearly not a business meeting. Marisol felt the ground go from under her feet. Casa Lucia was her and Raul's favorite restaurant. It was where they celebrated every wedding anniversary. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to upset you before practice." Carmen covered her friend's hand with her palm. "But you need to know the truth." At that moment, Marisol's cell phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number popped up on the screen. "I hope you decide to spar after all. Esteban." "He's fast," Carmen whistled, peering into her friend's phone. "How did he get my number?" "Apparently, he asked the club administrator. You're a regular member of the club. Your contacts are in the database." Marisol wanted to resent the breach of privacy, but for some reason, she couldn't. Instead, she saved the number in the phone book. She got home around 2 in the afternoon. Raul was still gone. There was a note on the kitchen table, written in his sprawling handwriting. "Urgent negotiations with clients. I'll be back late. Don't wait up." Marisol crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash can, then pulled out her phone and, after hesitating for a few seconds, texted, "Thanks for the offer. Maybe next Saturday?" The reply came almost instantly. "I'll look forward to it. How about a little lunch after practice? Purely professional tennis talk." She stared at the message for a long moment, hesitant to reply. Carmen's voice echoed in her head. "For the person who spends Saturday mornings not with you." Her fingers typed themselves. "Okay, just tennis." In the evening, Raul returned at midnight. He smelled of expensive wine and the same perfume. He didn't even try to explain his absence, going straight into the shower. Marisol lay in the dark, listening to the sound of the water, and for the first time in a long time didn't feel guilty about the messages on her phone. Monday began with a meeting of department heads. Marisol deliberately arrived last when everyone had already gathered in the conference room. She took her usual seat to the right of Raul, trying not to look in Paola's direction, who was sitting across from her making notes in her leather diary. The meeting went on as usual. Reports, schedules, plans for the next quarter. Marisol mechanically jotted down the highlights, but her attention was drawn to the subtle gestures, the way Raul leaned slightly toward Paola as she spoke, the way they exchanged brief glances, thinking no one noticed. "The sales department has excellent numbers for last month." Raul's voice sounded with undisguised pride. "Paola, tell me more about the new strategy." Paola stood up, ruffling her impeccably fitting cream-colored jacket. On her wrist, the very same bracelet glinted again. "Thanks to our new approach to working with the clinics, we've increased sales by 30%, she said confidently, occasionally glancing at Raul as if seeking his approval. After the meeting, Marisol lingered in the conference room gathering papers. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Paola accidentally forget her phone on the table and returned a minute later to retrieve it when only Raul was left in the room. Their muffled conversation and laughter echoed through Marisol's ears, echoing in her temples. In her office, she caught Carmen bringing in papers for her signature. "Are you holding up?" Her friend looked at Marisol carefully. "Is there a choice?" Marisol turned on her computer, trying to keep her hands busy with familiar work. "You know, I'm thinking of suggesting that Raul fire her." "Fire Paola? Right now?" "Why not? I have the right to do that. I'm still part owner of the company." Carmen shook her head. "It's risky. If we're right about their relationship, Raul will resist." "That's exactly what I want to test." Marisol stood up resolutely. "His reaction will say everything." She headed toward her husband's office, knocking briefly before entering. Raul was on the phone, but quickly ended the conversation when she appeared. "We need to discuss personnel matters." Marisol sat down across from him. "Is there something urgent?" "I think we should fire Paola Iturralde." Raul slowly put down the pen he was holding. His face tensed. "On what grounds?" "Her working methods are questionable. And then, isn't it strange that it's her department that's showing such growth when everyone else is barely keeping up with the plan? I don't see what's odd about it. His voice became hard. Paola is a top-notch professional. She's brought in big clients, built a great team. Or she just learned how to manipulate numbers and people, Marisol pitched forward. And you included. What do you mean? Raoul stood up abruptly, resting his hands on the table. You know exactly what I mean. These constant late-night meetings, business dinners. Enough. He slapped his palm on the table. I won't have you firing valuable employees because of unwarranted jealousy. Paola stays. That's out of the question. So my opinion doesn't mean anything in this company anymore? Your opinion matters when it's objective. Right now you're being hysterical. Marisol felt a cold rage rising inside. Okay, I'll remember this conversation. She walked out of the office, closing the door carefully behind her. Rosita sat in the reception area, pretending not to have heard their altercation, but her flushed ears said otherwise. When Marisol returned to her room, she found a cup of hot tea on the table. Carmen was sitting in a chair, waiting for her return. Judging by the screaming, it went exactly as we thought it would. Her friend handed her a box of chocolates. Even worse, Marisol sipped her tea. He called me hysterical. Can you believe it? In 10 years of marriage for the first time. At that moment, the phone vibrated. A message from Esteban. I can't stop thinking about your pitching technique. Why don't we meet Wednesday night on the court? I promise to be a strict coach. Marisol looked at the message, then at the closed office door. You know, Carmen, I think I've made plans for Wednesday. The day stretched on interminably. The staff seemed to avoid Marisol's office, preferring to communicate through Rosita. She even ordered lunch directly to the office, not wanting to face her husband in the common dining room. In the evening, as she packed her things, she heard a familiar laugh from the hallway. Paola was standing by the elevator fixing her hair. Raoul was saying something to her, almost touching her ear with his lips. They didn't notice Marisol, who froze in the shade of the office plants. She drove home alone for the first time in a long time, not asking her husband about his plans for the evening. In the garage of their home, she noticed a woman's scarf lying on the back seat of his car, a thin, silk scarf with an ornate pattern. It was the same one she'd seen around Paola's neck a week ago. Marisol went up to the apartment and first wrote to Esteban. Wednesday at 7 o'clock in the evening. I'll be expecting strict instructions about the technique. The reply came almost immediately. You won't regret it. By the way, a new restaurant has opened in the club after training. They say the pasta there is excellent. She paused for a second before replying, We'll see what the mood is. In the bedroom, Marisol pulled out of the closet the new tennis uniform she'd bought a month ago. The dark blue color accentuated her figure perfectly. She used to be embarrassed to wear such an open model, but now everything was different. A week had passed since the training session with Esteban. Marisol tried to behave as usual, but the inner tension was growing every day. She was noticing more and more little things that had escaped her attention before. This Thursday morning meeting was no exception. Paula was 10 minutes late, her cheeks flushed, her hair slightly disheveled as if she'd been running. Raoul walked in 3 minutes later as if nothing had happened, spreading out papers on his desk. Marisol noticed that the collar of his shirt was buttoned unevenly. I apologize for being late. Paula smiled at the attendees. Traffic. Carmen, seated next to Marisol, hummed quietly. Everyone knew Paula lived a 5-minute walk from the office. After the meeting, Marisol lingered at the coffee machine in the common area. 2 employees from accounting, not noticing her presence, were passionately discussing the latest office news. Have you seen her new bag? Definitely Prada. At least $3,000, one whispered. You bet. They say she often goes with her boss to business meetings now. Only for some reason it's always in the evening, another replied, raising her eyebrows meaningfully. Marisol coughed, and the women were momentarily silent, pretending to be engrossed in their coffee choices. In her office, she opened a folder containing the sales department's reports for the last quarter. The numbers were indeed impressive, but something about them was alarming. Marisol called an old acquaintance of hers who worked at one of the partner clinics. "Alejandra, this is Marisol. Tell me, did you really purchase 2 million pesos worth of equipment from us last month?" "What? No, of course not. We only took one machine, 400,000 at most." Marisol made a note in her notebook. Something was definitely not adding up here. At lunchtime, she went down to the archives where copies of all the contracts were kept. The elderly Consuela, who had worked there since the company was founded, smiled welcomingly. "Señora Ordóñez, what a surprise. Usually Señor Raúl or Señorita Iturralde is the one interested in the documents." "Yes? And how often do they come here?" "Oh, quite often lately, especially in the evenings when everyone has already dispersed." Marisol began looking through the contract folders. Some of the documents struck her as odd. The amounts didn't match what was in the electronic database. On a few contracts, the client's signatures looked suspiciously similar. That evening, she stayed late in the office, ostensibly working on the quarterly report. In reality, she waited for most of the staff to disperse. At 9:30, muffled voices came from Paula's office. Marisol quietly walked to the door. Through the loose blinds, she could see Raúl standing behind Paula with his hands on her shoulders. They were talking quietly about something, leaning over a laptop. "We need to be careful with the documents," Raúl's voice sounded concerned. "Marisol suspects something." "Don't worry, honey. Things will be different soon." Paula turned around in her chair, wrapping her arms around his neck. Marisol silently retreated into the shadows. Her hands trembled as she typed a message to Carmen. "Can you come to my place now? It's urgent." 40 minutes later, they were sitting in the living room of Marisol's apartment. Carmen listened silently to her friend's story, shaking her head occasionally. "So it's not just their affair," she finally said. "They're messing around with the paperwork." "Looks like it. But why? The company's already doing well. Maybe they're cooking up some kind of scam. You said you heard talk about rewriting your share." Marisol stood up and paced the room. "We need to check all the paperwork for the last 6 months, every contract, every payment. It's a huge job. You're going to need help." "Will you help?" "Of course. But we need to proceed with caution. If they suspect anything—" Marisol's phone vibrated. A message from Esteban. "Haven't seen you on the court in a week. Everything okay?" She smiled, looking at the screen. After their practice and dinner at the restaurant, they texted periodically. Esteban was an attentive conversationalist, never overstepping boundaries, but there was a genuine interest in his messages. "Text him," Carmen nudged her friend. "You need to get your mind off all this stuff once in a while." "I'm not sure now is the right time to—" "Right now is exactly the right time. While those two are making their plans, you shouldn't be sitting around suffering." Marisol wrote, "Lots of work, but I plan to be on the court Saturday." The reply came instantly. "I'll look forward to it." A new bar with live music opened up after practice. "You go?" Carmen squeezed her friend's hand. "I'll take care of the paperwork. Something tells me we're going to need all the proof we can get of their machinations soon." Late that night, when Carmen had already left, Marisol heard the key turn in the lock. Raúl had come home, smelling of expensive perfume and alcohol. "Are you awake?" He looked surprised at his wife sitting in the dark living room. "Been working late," she pointed to the laptop. "Studying sales reports. Very interesting reading, you know." Raúl froze for a moment but quickly pulled himself together. "No need to bother. Paola is doing a fine job with the reporting." "Oh yes, of that I have no doubt." Marisol closed the laptop. She's generally a very talented employee. Raoul remained silent, heading for the bedroom. Marisol could hear him having a long conversation with someone on the phone in the bathroom, muffling his voice to a whisper. She opened her messages and texted Esteban, "Saturday at 10. And yeah, I don't mind stopping by that bar after practice." Friday started out unusually for Marisol. She overslept. For the first time in years, her alarm clock didn't go off, or maybe she just didn't hear it after a sleepless night. Raoul had already left, leaving a note on the kitchen table. "Early meeting with investors. See you at the office." She hurriedly drank her coffee and threw on the first business suit she could find and drove to work. Traffic was terrible, and by the time Marisol got to the office, it was almost 11. "Señora Ordóñez," Rosita looked worried. "Señor Raúl has been asking about you. He's in his office with Señorita Iturralde, asking not to be disturbed in an important meeting." Marisol nodded, heading for her room. There was already a stack of documents on the desk requiring signatures. Among them she noticed a strange contract. The amount was 3 times more than what had been discussed at the last meeting. Carmen knocked on the door. "You look tired." "Been up half the night studying the documentation." Marisol handed her friend the contract. "Take a look at this. Something's not right here." Carmen scrutinized the papers. "They're creating fictitious contracts. But why?" "To show growth in the sales department. Or maybe they're moving money out through shell companies. We need to check all the recent transactions." Suddenly, footsteps and voices were heard in the hallway. Raoul and Paola were returning from a meeting. Carmen quickly tucked the documents into her folder and pretended they were discussing normal business matters. The day stretched on slowly. Marisol carefully pretended to be immersed in her work, although all her thoughts were occupied with her upcoming meeting with Esteban. She had even bought a new dress, dark blue, austere but elegant. Around 6 in the evening, most of the staff began to disperse. Marisol stayed behind, ostensibly working on the annual report. She knew that Raoul usually stayed late on Fridays. At 7 o'clock, when the office was almost empty, she heard voices coming from her husband's office. The door was loose, and the words came through clearly enough. "All set?" It was Paola's voice. "Almost. The lawyers have prepared the papers. All that remains is to get the timing right," Raoul replied. "And your wife? Does she suspect anything?" Marisol is too busy with her tennis to notice the obvious. "In a month, her share of the company will be rewritten to you, and we can act freely." Marisol felt everything inside go icy. She pulled out her phone and turned on the recorder, trying to breathe as quietly as possible. "Are you sure this is legal?" You could hear the concern in Paola's voice. "Absolutely. I've thought it through. I have documents proving her incompetence as an executive, plus evidence of financial irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "The ones we've created over the last 3 months. All those weird contracts and payments that went through her signature. She didn't even really read what she was signing." Marisol barely held back a cry of outrage. So all these strange documents were all part of their plan. And if she resists, she won't. When she realizes she could lose not only her company but her reputation, she'll quietly walk away. Marisol has always been too soft for business. "And then we can get married." Paola's voice took on a dreamy note. "Of course, my love. I've already filed divorce papers, but I'm keeping it a secret for now. I want all the blows for her to come at the same time." Marisol felt a chill run down her spine. She continued to take notes, afraid to move. "What about the money we took out through the sham contracts?" "They're already in offshore accounts. Once we get rid of Marisol, we'll transfer them back through the new companies. No one will suspect a thing." "You're a genius, love." Paola's voice became playful. "That's why I fell in love with you." There was the sound of a kiss, then a rustle of papers. We need to check the last of the paperwork. Don't want any traces left behind, Raoul said. Marisol carefully backed away from the door, still recording the conversation. She walked quietly to her office, closed the door, and only then allowed herself to exhale. Her hands trembled as she stopped the recording. Without thinking, she dialed Carmen's number. "I need a trustworthy lawyer, right now." "What's wrong?" "I have the tape. They're planning to take my company away from me, and they're not just taking it away, they're framing me by forging documents. I know a good specialist, Alvaro Morel. He does corporate law. I'll text you his contacts right now." Marisol saved the recording in several places, on her phone, in the cloud, and on a separate thumb drive. Then she gathered up all the strange documents she'd managed to uncover over the past few days. Leaving the office, she ran into Paula in the lobby. She looked unusually happy, wearing a new diamond necklace around her neck. "Leaving already, Señora Ordóñez? And your husband will be staying late. A lot of work." Paula smiled with ill-concealed superiority. "Yes, he always has a lot of work on Fridays." Marisol smiled back, feeling bitter at every word. In the car, the first thing she did was dial the lawyer's number. The answering machine told her that the workday was over, but she left a message anyway, asking for an urgent appointment. Marisol decided not to return home. She drove to the hotel, texting Esteban on the way. "Remember that bar with the live music? I'll be there in an hour, if you're free." The reply came a minute later. "I'll be waiting. Looks like you need a distraction." Marisol looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Tears stood in her eyes, but she resolutely brushed them away. Now was not the time for weakness. We must act, quickly and decisively. Attorney Alvaro Morel's office was in an old building in the center of town. Heavy velvet drapes, leather chairs, and a massive oak desk created an atmosphere of reliability and privacy. Marisol sat across from Alvaro, nervously rubbing the handle of her bag as he listened intently to the tape. "These are serious allegations." Alvaro took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. "Not only are they planning a raid, but they're forging documents, moving money out through offshore. You were right to come to me." Marisol pulled out a folder of collected evidence. "Here are all the suspicious contracts I found, and account statements that show strange transactions." Alvaro methodically went through each document, making notes in a notepad. His eyebrows frowned harder with each page turned. "You know what's most interesting?" He raised his eyes to Marisol. "They made the classic mistake of many crooks, getting too greedy. Those amounts in the contracts, they're so inflated that any financial audit would spot the discrepancies immediately." At that moment, Carmen, who had joined the meeting a little later, entered the office. "I brought something else. Internal sales reports for the last 6 months. It clearly shows how they manipulated the numbers." Alvaro spread the new documents out on the table, creating some sort of system he alone could understand. "Señora Ordóñez, we have enough material for a strong case, but we need to proceed very carefully. If they realize that you know something—" "They already suspect something." Marisol remembered her last conversation with Raoul. "My husband has become more tense, constantly asking why I'm staying late at the office. All the more reason to be careful. Continue with your usual behavior. Sign documents, but now make inconspicuous notes on each: date, time, special marks. This will help us prove that the signatures on the forged documents aren't yours." Marisol pulled out her phone and showed the latest messages from Raoul. "He's calling me for dinner tonight. Says he wants to discuss the future of the company." "Go ahead," Alvaro nodded. "But be very careful with every word, and keep your phone on, with the recording activated." After the 3-hour counseling session, Marisol felt exhausted. They had worked out a detailed plan of action, outlining every step. Alvaro had even prepared a draft of the lawsuit, in case they had to act quickly. "I'll stop by your place before dinner," Carmen said as they left the lawyer's office. "Can you help me pick out an outfit? I don't want to go home. Every single thing there reminds me of my life with Raul, of how he betrayed me." "Then let's go to my place. I have the right dress." In Carmen's apartment, spacious and bright, Marisol felt calmer. Her friend pulled several clothing options out of her closet. "This black dress here will be perfect, strict but elegant, and I have the right shoes." While Marisol was changing, her phone rang. It was Esteban. "How are you? After last night, I'm a little worried." Marisol smiled, remembering their meeting at the bar. Esteban had been an attentive listener, not asking unnecessary questions and just being there for her when she needed him. "It's all good. Just a rough patch. You know, the court helps with the stress. Maybe tomorrow morning?" "Sorry, I can't tomorrow. A lot of paperwork." "I understand, but if you want a distraction, call me anytime." Carmen, who had heard the conversation, shook her head. "He's really worried about you." "Now's not the time to think about that." Marisol fixed her hair in front of the mirror. "We need to focus on the case." At 7 in the evening, she entered the restaurant where Raul was already waiting for her. He'd chosen their favorite table by the window, ordered the best wine. It was just like old times, only now every gesture he made seemed fake. "You look beautiful," he smiled, but the smile didn't touch his eyes. "Thank you. You wanted to talk about the company?" "Yes, I have some interesting restructuring plans. I think we should change the management system a bit." Marisol sipped her wine, remembering the lawyer's advice. "Listen carefully, keep the conversation going, but don't agree on anything in particular." "And what do you suggest?" "I think you should get less involved in operational matters, concentrate on representative functions, key account work, and delegate the day-to-day stuff to more competent employees." "Like Paula Iturralde?" Marisol said in as neutral a tone as possible. Raul tensed for a moment. "She's a good specialist. And yes, I believe she could take over some of your duties." "That's an interesting suggestion. Give me time to think about it." "Of course, dear. But don't take too long to decide. Business doesn't wait." The rest of dinner passed in tense conversation about neutral topics. Raul talked about new contracts, about the company's development plans, and Marisol thought about how many lies were in every word he said. At home, the first thing she did was send a text to Alvaro. "He's acting up. He's offering to step down voluntarily." The reply came almost immediately. "Don't accept any offers. We're meeting at the same time tomorrow. We need to expedite the paperwork." Marisol pulled out a folder from the safe with the original company incorporation documents. Now she understood why Raul had been insistent lately on moving them to the office for convenience. She photographed each page and sent copies to her lawyer. As she fell asleep in the guest bedroom, she thought about the fact that the denouement was coming. Raul was clearly in a hurry, which meant she had to be ready for anything. Her phone vibrated on the bedside table, a message from Esteban. "Everything will work out. You're stronger than you think." Those simple words strangely gave her confidence. Tomorrow was going to be a big day. She would need to discreetly copy some more important documents from the office. The game was on, and she wasn't going to lose. Monday morning was unusually sunny. Marisol arrived at the office earlier than usual, wanting to review the last of the documents before the general management meeting. She found fresh coffee on her desk. Rosita was always the first to arrive and took care of such little things. As the office slowly filled with employees, Marisol methodically checked each paper, making inconspicuous notes in the corners of the pages as Alvaro had advised. Her assistant occasionally dropped by with new folders of documents, but Marisol noticed that the girl was more distant, as if she already knew the changes were coming. At 9 o'clock the meeting began. Raoul looked unusually enthusiastic and kept glancing at Paula, who sat 2 chairs away from him in an expensive new suit. Marisol noticed that the same diamond necklace was back on her neck. "I have some great news," Raoul began, looking around the audience. "Our performance for the last quarter has exceeded expectations. I'd especially like to recognize the work of the sales department under the leadership of Paula Iturralde." Marisol kept a nonchalant expression on her face, though inside everything was boiling with resentment. She knew the true cost of these metrics. Suddenly, the door of the conference room swung open. Paula stood on the threshold, but not the confident woman who usually radiated superiority, but a disheveled and furious fury. In her hands she held some papers. "You!" She pointed a finger at Marisol. "You think you're the smartest?" Everyone present froze. Raoul rose from his seat. "Paola, what's going on?" "Ask your wife. She's going through my papers, spying on me." Marisol slowly stood up, keeping her outward composure. "I have every right to inspect the records of any department of our company. I'm still co-owner." Paola flew over to the table and threw the papers in front of Marisol with a swing. "Not much longer. You can say goodbye to the company." The papers scattered across the table and floor. Marisol recognized among them copies of the very suspicious contracts she had marked for the lawyer. "What's going on here?" Raoul's voice became hard. "Your wife is following us, collecting some evidence." Paula was about to scream, her perfect makeup smeared with tears. The rest of the meeting watched in shock as the scene unfolded. Someone began to slowly slip out of the room. Raoul walked over to the table and picked up one of the scattered sheets. His face changed when he saw the notes in the margins. "Marisol, is there something you want to explain to me?" "No, dear," she said the word with obvious irony for the first time. "I think you're the one who owes me some explanations, like why the amounts in the contracts don't match the actual deliveries." Paula turned pale. "You have no right to—" "I do. Not only that." Marisol pulled out her copies of the documents from a folder. "Shall we discuss the strange transactions through offshore accounts or talk about forged client signatures?" Raoul grabbed her elbow. "Shut up! Get in my office now!" "Take your hand away." Marisol said it quietly, but with such steel in her voice that he backed away automatically. By this point, only the most curious employees remained in the room, eagerly catching every word of the unfolding drama. Carmen, standing by the door, discreetly turned on the camera on her phone. Paola, realizing that the situation was getting out of control, began picking up the scattered papers. "You're going to regret this. We're going to destroy you." "Really?" Marisol smiled. "I wonder how the tax authorities will react to information about your machinations." Raoul turned sharply pale. "You're bluffing. Want to check?" She pulled out her cell phone. "I have a lot of interesting recordings. For example, your conversation about how you plan to take the company away from me." Paula froze with the papers in her hands. Raoul clenched his fists. "It's illegal to record other people's conversations. And it's legal to forge documents and move money offshore." At that moment, Rosita entered the room. "Señora Ordóñez, Señor Morel is here to see you." Alvaro appeared in the doorway holding a leather briefcase. "Good morning. I see I'm just in time." Paula laughed hysterically. "A lawyer? Really? What are you going to do?" "For starters, file a lawsuit for attempted raiding and grand fraud." Alvaro opened his briefcase. "We've gathered enough evidence." Raoul grabbed the nearest folder off the table. "You can't prove anything. It's all slander." "Really?" Marisol nodded to Carmen, and she began handing out copies of the documents to those present. "Then explain why the amounts in the official contracts don't match the bank entries, and why half of the client's signatures turned out to be forged." Paola rushed toward the door, but Alvaro blocked her path. I wouldn't advise leaving the building right now. The police are on their way. The police? Raúl collapsed into a chair. You wouldn't dare. I already have. Marisol gathered her papers. And you know what? You can keep your mistress and your dirty schemes, but I'm not giving you the company. She headed for the exit but stopped in the doorway. Oh yes, I almost forgot. I've been going over the articles of incorporation. Do you know what I found? According to the contract, if one of the co-owners attempts to misappropriate the other's share, all assets automatically go to the affected party. That's an interesting clause, isn't it? Too bad you didn't reread it before you started this whole adventure. In the silence that followed, Paula's sobs and Raúl's heavy breathing could be heard. Marisol walked out of the hall with her head held high, feeling the stares of everyone present. After the scandal in the conference room, Marisol had locked herself in her office. Her hands were still shaking, though outwardly she remained unfazed. Carmen brought her a strong coffee and sat next to her, silently supporting her friend. Do you think they're planning a retaliatory strike now? Marisol sipped the scalding beverage. Undoubtedly. But we have the advantage. The element of surprise has already worked. There was a knock at the door. It was Rosita, pale and anxious. Señora Ordóñez, Señor Raúl requires you in his office, immediately. Marisol glanced over to Carmen. Tell him I'm busy. If he wants to talk, he can come himself. 10 minutes later, the door swung open with a clatter. Raúl flew into the office, his usually impeccable appearance disrupted. His tie was bunched at the side. Droplets of sweat glistened on his forehead. Everybody out, he bellowed. Carmen defiantly remained seated. I'm not going anywhere, and I suggest you watch your tone. Raúl slammed the door shut and loomed over Marisol's desk. Do you realize what you've done? The whole office is buzzing. Paula is hysterical. What did you expect? That I would quietly walk away, letting you appropriate my share of the company? Marisol leaned back in her chair, maintaining her outward composure. That's slander. You have no proof. Really? She pulled out her cell phone. Why don't we listen to the recording of your conversation with Paola, especially the part where you discuss taking money offshore? Raúl's face turned white. You recorded us? That's illegal. And forging documents is legal? Stealing your own wife's company is legal? He slumped down in his chair, suddenly losing all his aggression. What do you want? For starters, a full audit of all transactions over the last year, and Paola's immediate dismissal. No, he stood up abruptly. That's not going to happen. I have my trump cards too, my dear. For example, documents about your own financial irregularities. Marisol grinned. You mean those fake papers you slipped me to sign? Don't bother. I have proof of the forgeries. At that moment, Paola entered the office without knocking. Her makeup was finally ruined by tears, but fury burned in her eyes. You think you've won? We're going to destroy you. Everyone will know what you really are. Marisol rose slowly. Really? And what will they find out? How the two of you were running a contract scam, or how you plan to take my company away from me? We have witnesses. The employees will attest to your incompetence. The same employees who are now reading copies of your forged documents. I think they'd be happy to testify, just not in your favor. Raúl grabbed Paola's arm. Shut up! You're only making things worse. No, let her speak. Marisol turned on the recorder on her phone. I'm interested in hearing the details. Paola wrenched her hand away. You're just jealous, because he loves me, and not you. Loves you? Marisol laughed. So much so that he's willing to frame you for a criminal case? By the way, who do you think he's going to save when the investigation starts, himself or you? A flicker of doubt flashed across Paola's face. She turned to Raoul. "You're not going to let her do this, are you? I mean, we had a plan." Raoul ran his hand over his face. "The plan will have to change. Marisol, let's discuss this calmly. I'm sure we can come to an agreement." "Agreement?" Marisol shook her head. "Do you really think I'm going to come to an agreement with you after all this? You have no choice. The company needs strong leadership. And this is coming from the man who almost bankrupted it with his machinations?" There was a knock at the door. It was Alvaro. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I think you should take a look at this." He placed a folder of documents on the table. "Preliminary results of the audit. Very interesting reading." Raoul rushed to the desk, but Marisol was quicker. She opened the folder and began reading, feeling a cold rage growing inside. "So, not only did you plan to take the company away from me, but you managed to siphon off almost $1 million through shell companies." Paula turned pale. "That's not true. Raoul, tell her." But Raoul was silent, and that silence was more eloquent than any words. "Here's what we'll do." Marisol closed the folder. "You have 1 hour to leave the building. Tomorrow the official inspection begins. And if a single document disappears from the office—" "You wouldn't dare!" Paula stepped forward, but Carmen stepped between them. "I already have. And by the way, security has been instructed not to let you out of the building with any documents." Raoul grabbed Paula's arm. "Come on, we need to talk things over." "But what about our plans? The company? Our future?" "Shut up." He practically dragged her out of the office. When the door closed behind them, Marisol finally allowed herself to exhale. Carmen hugged her friend. "You did good. But this isn't over." "I know. They'll try something." Alvaro gathered up the paperwork. "Don't worry. Legally, we're completely protected. And this recording of their conversation is a gift to the investigation." Marisol looked at her watch. It was only noon, but it seemed like an eternity had passed. She pulled out her phone and texted Esteban. "Today was a busy day. Would you like some company at dinner?" The reply came instantly. "Sure. Are you okay?" "I will be. I will be now." After Monday's scandalous incident, the atmosphere in the office was oppressive. Marisol deliberately arrived early so she could go through the paperwork before the rest of the staff showed up. The guards had reported that Raoul and Paola had tried to remove some files last night but had been stopped. She was met in the reception area by Rosita, looking unusually agitated. "Señora Ordóñez, yesterday after you left, Señor Raoul took some files from the computer. I happened to see him copying the data onto a flash drive." "Thank you, Rosita. You did the right thing to tell me." Marisol immediately called the computer security specialist Alvaro had recommended. An hour later, he was already working on the system, restoring deleted files and verifying exactly what data had been copied. Carmen brought fresh coffee and croissants. "You haven't had breakfast at all. Gotta keep up your strength." "You know, I slept soundly for the first time in weeks." Marisol broke off a piece of croissant. "It's like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. This is just the beginning. Raoul won't just give up." At that moment, the computer technician beckoned to them. "Mrs. Ordóñez, take a look." They tried to delete transaction information through offshore companies, but I restored the data. And something else interesting. It looks like they had parallel accounting. Tables of double bookkeeping appeared on the screen. The amounts in the official documents differed greatly from the actual figures. Marisol took a few screenshots and sent them to Alvaro. "Print everything out and make backups," she turned to Carmen. "It looks like they've been operating this scheme for over a year." At lunchtime, Alvaro called, "Marisol, I have news. I checked out those offshore companies. Guess whose name they're registered in?" "Paula's?" "Including. But there's another firm registered to you." Marisol went cold. "What? I've never—" "Of course you haven't. The signature is forged. They've been preparing a backup. If their scheme got exposed, all the blame would fall on you." "Clever thinking." Marisol clenched the phone. "What do I do?" "I've already filed a forgery report. Forensics will confirm that the signature isn't yours. But we need to act quickly. Meet me in my office at 9 tomorrow morning. We'll prepare for trial." After lunch, a young woman from the accounting department came into the office. "Señora Ordóñez, may I speak with you? It's important." "Of course, Maria. What's wrong?" "Señorita Iturralde. She forced us to falsify figures in our reports, threatened to fire us if we told. I have copies of the original documents. I kept them just in case." Marisol looked at the girl carefully. "Are you ready to testify in court?" "Yes, and I'm not the only one. A lot of people in the accounting department are tired of being scared." By evening, an impressive stack of documents had accumulated in Marisol's office. One by one, employees came in with information about Raúl and Paula's machinations. Some brought copies of documents, others told of suspicious transactions. Around 6, Esteban suddenly arrived at the office. "Thought I'd check on you." "Thanks," she smiled weakly. "It's hard to believe this is all really happening. You'll get through it. I believe in you." At that moment, Carmen literally flew into the office. "Marisol, Raúl is calling an extraordinary board meeting for tomorrow." "What? He can't do that without my consent." "Maybe it's for the best," Esteban said thoughtfully. "Let everyone see his true face." Alvaro, whom they called immediately, agreed. "It's their mistake. We have all the trump cards on our hands. Let them hold a meeting. We'll be ready." All evening they prepared for tomorrow. Marisol, with Carmen and Alvaro, strategized, prepared documents, assigned roles. Esteban stayed with them, helping to organize the materials and supporting Marisol morally. "You know," Marisol said when they were alone, "I'm grateful to fate that I met you just now." "Me too." He squeezed her hand gently. "But let's get your business sorted out first, and then there'll be time for everything else." Late that night, Marisol returned to her apartment. Raúl had obviously spent the night elsewhere. His things were not in the bedroom. There was a note on the kitchen table. "I hope you realize what you're doing. It's not too late to stop this." She crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash can. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed Carmen's message. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" "Yes. Alvaro has all the paperwork ready. The legal team is on standby." Marisol walked to the window. The lights of the night city twinkled below, but right now they didn't make her feel homesick. Rather, they gave her determination. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow she would regain not only her company, but control of her life. The phone vibrated again, a message from Esteban. "Tomorrow I'll be there for you, no matter what happens." She smiled and replied, "Thank you, for everything." Then she pulled out her file folder and went through each sheet one more time. No mistakes could be made tomorrow. Raúl and Paula must be preparing some kind of surprise, but now she was ready for any surprises. In the bedroom, Marisol pulled out of the closet a strict navy blue suit, her armor for important negotiations. Tomorrow she must look impeccable. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter of her life. The courthouse greeted Marisol with the coolness of marble walls and the resounding echo of footsteps in the long corridors. She arrived an hour before the session began. Alvaro had insisted on going over all the documents one more time. Carmen was already waiting in the lobby with 2 cups of hot coffee. "You look really pale." Carmen handed her friend a coffee. "Did you get any sleep at all?" "About 3 hours." Marisol adjusted her perfectly fitting suit. "Been going through paperwork all night." Alvaro appeared at 8:30 sharp, impeccably dressed as always, carrying an impressive leather briefcase. "Good morning, ladies. I have news. The experts have confirmed the forgery of your signatures on the documents of the offshore companies. At that moment, Raul and Paula appeared at the entrance to the courthouse, accompanied by two men in expensive suits. Obviously, they're lawyers. Paula looked unnaturally pale even under a layer of makeup, and Raul was nervously rubbing his tie, a gesture Marisol knew well from their years together. "Don't look at them," Carmen said quietly. "Focus on the case." They walked to the conference room. Marisol sat next to Alvaro, trying not to meet the gaze of Raul, who had positioned himself across the room. Paula took a seat in the second row, tapping her foot nervously on the floor. When the judge entered the room, Marisol felt her throat dry. But as soon as the hearing began, all the excitement faded away as the facts and documents began to speak. Alvaro began by presenting evidence of financial fraud. "Your Honor, you have before you documents confirming the systematic withdrawal of funds through shell companies. Note the dates and amounts of the transactions." Raul's lawyer immediately objected. "These documents could have been fabricated. We have evidence that it was Senora Ordóñez who was involved in the financial irregularities." "That's where you're right," Alvaro smiled. "You do have documents with my client's signature on them, except that forensics has already confirmed that those signatures are forgeries." He handed the judge the forensic report. Marisol noticed Paola turn even paler and grabbed Raul's arm. "Moreover," Alvaro continued, "we have an audio recording of a conversation where the defendants discuss a plan to misappropriate a share of the company." Raul jumped up. "Objection! This recording was made illegally." The judge scrutinized the documents provided. "Objection overruled. The recording was made in a public place in the company's office. Let's hear it." When the voices of Raul and Paola were heard discussing the plan to take the company away from Marisol, there was dead silence in the room. The words about forging documents and moving money offshore were especially clear. "I would also like to present witnesses to the court." Alvaro gestured for a group of company employees to enter. "These people are ready to testify under oath to the pressure and coercion to falsify documents." Maria from the accounting department was the first to testify, describing how Paula had forced employees to falsify reports. She was followed by others, each with their own story of fraud and threats. Raul's lawyers tried to challenge each testimony, but the facts were irrefutable. Especially impressive were the documents about the double bookkeeping, which had been recovered after an attempt to destroy them. And finally, Alvaro pulled out the last folder. "I want to present to the court documents about the defendants' recent attempts to destroy evidence. We have surveillance footage showing them attempting to remove documents from the office in defiance of a security prohibition." Raul whispered something furiously to his attorney, but the lawyer only shook his head. Paula sat with her head down, crumpling her handkerchief nervously. During a break, Marisol went out into the hallway for a sip of water. There she ran into Raul. "Are you satisfied?" He gritted through his teeth. "Ruined everything we've spent years building." "No, Raul. It was you who ruined everything, with your greed and your treachery." "I did it for us. The company needed to be reorganized." "For us?" Marisol grinned bitterly. "Or for yourself and your mistress?" Alvaro walked over to them. "Marisol, let's go back to the hall. The judgment will now be read." The judge was surprisingly brief. After listening to all the parties and examining the evidence, he ruled that Raul and Paola's actions were illegal. The company would be completely taken over by Marisol, and the case file would be turned over to the prosecutor's office for criminal proceedings for fraud. Paula burst into tears in the hall. "It's not fair. We've worked so hard." "Quiet," Raul hissed at her, but it was too late. "Worked?" Marisol turned to them. "On how to steal the company, or on how to get millions out through offshore." As they left the courthouse, Esteban was waiting for them at the entrance with a bouquet of white roses. "Congratulations on your victory." Marisol accepted the flowers, feeling the tension of the past weeks finally let go. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Raúl and Paola hurriedly getting into the car, avoiding the gaze of the reporters gathered outside the courthouse. "What now?" Carmen asked. "Now?" Marisol smiled. "Now we're going to work. For real, without machinations or deceit." Alvaro shook her hand. "The prosecutor's office will contact you in the next few days. They'll need additional testimony for the criminal case." "Thank you. For everything." Esteban opened his car door. "How about we celebrate? I know a great restaurant with a view of the city." Marisol looked at her watch. "I need to stop by the office first. The team that has been on my side all these days is waiting there. They deserve to be the first to know the news." "Then I'll come with you." Carmen took her friend under her arm. "Someone needs to toast the new sole proprietor of the company." There was an unfamiliar buzz in the office as Marisol entered the lobby. The employees were gathered in groups talking quietly, but there was silence when she appeared. She noticed some of them furtively wiping their eyes. Apparently news of the court's decision had already spread through the office. Rosita met her at the elevator with a cup of freshly brewed coffee and a stack of morning papers. "Señora Ordóñez, everyone is waiting for you in the conference room. Congratulations to you." Marisol smiled softly. "Thank you, Rosita, for everything, especially for your support during these difficult weeks." The conference room was packed with department heads and key employees. Maria from accounting, who had testified in court, was nervously rubbing the edge of her blouse. Ramon, the technical director, was tapping his pen on his desk. Everyone froze when Marisol entered, accompanied by Carmen. "Good morning." Marisol looked around at the gathered crowd. "I think you already know about the court's decision. As of today, I am the sole owner of the company." A murmur of approval swept through the hall. Someone began to applaud, and soon everyone joined in. "But this isn't just my victory," she continued as the applause died down. "It's a victory for everyone who wasn't afraid to stand up for the truth, who found the courage to speak out about the machinations, to provide documents, to testify in court." Maria lowered her head, but Marisol noticed the girl smiling. "Now we have a lot of work ahead of us. We need to restore the company's reputation, establish honest relations with clients, review all questionable contracts, but I'm sure we can do it together." After the meeting, a group of technical department employees approached her. "Señora Ordóñez, we found some more strange files in the system. It looks like they were trying to hide traces of their operations." "Good. Pass everything directly to the investigators. The prosecutor's office is handling this now." In her office, Marisol's first order of business was to remove the photo of her and Raúl together from the wall, a huge portrait of them smiling in front of the company logo. Noticing this, Carmen pulled a new framed photo out of her bag, a picture of the entire team at the last company holiday party. "I think this would be more appropriate," her friend said, hanging the photo on the vacated spot. Around noon, boxes of Raúl and Paola's personal belongings were brought in. The court had banned them from the office. Marisol instructed Rosita to sort through their contents and see if there were any company documents among them. "And what's this?" Carmen pulled an expensive necklace out of Paola's box. "Looks like the same one she's been wearing the last few days." "Let her have it." Marisol didn't even glance at the jewelry. "I'm more interested in documents and flash drives." At 2 o'clock, Esteban came in with lunch. "Figured you needed a distraction. Besides, you probably haven't had time to eat." They settled into her office. Esteban had brought food from Marisol's favorite Italian restaurant, seafood pasta and tiramisu for dessert. "You know," she said, leaning back in her chair, "for the first time in a long time, I feel truly free. And what are your plans for that freedom? First, to get the company in order, and then, she smiled as she looked at him, then we'll see. After lunch, a series of meetings with clients began. Many were disturbed by the news of the lawsuit, and Marisol patiently explained the situation to each, assuring them of the stability of the company and the honesty of the new policies. By evening, she was feeling exhausted but satisfied. Going through the latest documents, Marisol found a draft of a letter Raoul had written, a proposal to merge with a large corporation that would effectively mean the loss of their company's independence. That's what they were really planning. Carmen shook her head, reading the letter over her friend's shoulder. To sell the company after they'd gotten rid of you. At 7 p.m., most of the employees had gone home. Marisol stood at the panoramic window of her office, watching the lights of the evening city come on. The phone rang on her desk, a message from Esteban. "The court is booked for Saturday. Remember our bet?" She smiled, remembering their conversation at their first practice. He had proposed a bet then. If she won even one set, he would grant her any wish. She didn't have time to respond. There was a knock on the door. "Señora Ordóñez," it was Rosita. "The paperwork from the IRS has arrived. They're starting an audit of all transactions for the last year." "Thank you, Rosita. Put them on the desk. I'll get to work on them tomorrow morning." As the secretary left, Marisol pulled out of her purse the small notepad she always carried with her. On the first page was written down a quote she had once accidentally read. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize how strong you are." She closed the notebook and wrote a reply to Esteban. "I haven't forgotten. I'm definitely going to win this time." As she packed her things, Marisol noticed a picture on the table that had fallen out of the box of Raoul's things. It showed them on the day the company opened. Young, happy, full of hope. She put the photo in her desk drawer. That was history, and now a new chapter of her life was beginning. Carmen was waiting for her in the reception area. "Dinner? I know a great place that serves the best margaritas in town." "Sorry, not tonight. I have something else to do." Really? She just wanted to be alone, to process what had happened. As she walked down to the parking lot, she thought about how much had changed over the weeks. She'd lost her husband, but she'd found herself. She'd lost her illusions, but she'd found real friends. The phone rang in the car. Alvaro. "Marisol, there's a meeting with the investigators tomorrow morning at 10. They want to discuss the details of the criminal case." "I'll be ready." As she pulled out of the parking lot, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the rearview mirror. And for the first time in a long time, she saw calm and confidence in her eyes. There was a long road ahead, rebuilding the company, lawsuits, new challenges. But now she knew for sure she could do it.